What's up, gals and pals? It's your boy Vino Valentino, and welcome back to 60-Second Cocktails. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the YouTube PubCrawl, and I'm so excited to have my buddy and fellow New Yorker, Rob Driemeyer of the Broadway Barfly. Rob, say hello to the audience.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
All right. This is awesome, man. Listen, there's not too many other New Yorkers in this niche. I think it's like me, you, the wee Pearl. I don't think there's too many of us. So
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have another New Yorker. You'll notice that Rob's accent is not quite as pronounced as mine, though.
I'm not native.
All right, there you go.
I'm a Midwesterner at heart, but I've lived here longer than anywhere else at this point.
All right, good. So you haven't been infected with the New York accent yet. So Rob, listen, before we get into the nitty gritty, the number one thing, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a Manhattan.
Oh, how appropriate, huh? There you go. I love it. Well, I'm actually drinking something, kind of an homage to you. And this is a cocktail I just made last week. And I'll put a link up here for you guys to check it out. And that is the Star Cocktail.
Oh, cheers.
Rob's a Broadway guy. And, the stars are born to Broadway. Here we go. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh,
I saw your video of the Star.
Yes. A fantastic cocktail. You guys need to look out. Me and Rob are going to be doing something soon. We're going to kind of connect on a cocktail and a Broadway thing, and it's going to be fun. We're working on it, guys. It's going to be fun. So anyway, Rob, listen, we are going to do everybody's favorite YouTube game show, the Fast Pour.
Okay.
All right. So you have 60 seconds to answer 6 very easy questions. Let me know when you're ready. You ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
And here we go. All right, Rob, what is your favorite cocktail?
Manhattan.
All right, here we go. Your favorite spirit?
Gin.
All right, your favorite mixer?
Cointreau.
Your favorite hangover food?
Oh, cold pizza.
Cold pizza, nice. Your favorite bar?
Joe Allen.
Joe Allen?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I never heard of it. And your favorite YouTube channel that's not a cocktail channel, like any other non-cocktail channel?
I've been listening to Disney Food Blog a lot.
Disney Food Blog. All right, that's not what I expected, but we'll go with that one, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Rob. So you got that one nice and easy, smooth. See, this is a guy that's used to being on the stage or something, because he was too relaxed during that whole thing, All right, well, Rob, listen, tell us a little bit about your background, man. You just told us that you're not a native New Yorker. So where are you from, and how'd you end up in New York?
Wow, that's a long answer. I'm from a place called Highland, Illinois, about 30 miles outside of St. Louis. That's where I'm born and raised. I came to New York to be a performer in my late teens, early 20s. I was a singer-dancer type, lots of summer stocks, dinner theaters, that sort of thing. Did that until I sort of outgrew it. I did about a 10-year stint doing stand-up comedy.
Oh, really?
Then led to producing theater, which is where I am now.
So that's what you're doing now, producing theater?
Maybe 10 years or so.
Oh,
and
wow,
then,
cool.
Of course, that evolved into a YouTube channel.
Yes. So how'd you end up getting into YouTube? Was it because of COVID and Broadway kind of shutting down, or the theaters closing down?
Yeah. The idea of Broadway Barfly, which is the YouTube channel I have, really started back when I was doing comedy from 2000 to 2010, maybe. A lot of comics had podcasts. That was really becoming a thing. I did not, but I had a concept for one.
Oh, okay.
And I had always thought I would have a co-host or a guest, and every episode we would see a comic, a film, read a book, something of that nature that we could discuss, that we had both experienced, and pair it with a cocktail. That I never did it, but that was the idea.
Okay.
It stuck with me. And when COVID came along in March of 2020, about 18 months now ago, that first week I knew that we were going to be at home. I was like, I'm going to go nuts if I have to sit here for an indefinite amount of time. And so kind of out of the blue, I pulled this old idea out. I set up my little phone camera, and I decided to talk a little bit about the musical Mame and the play Auntie Mame, because there's a lot of drinking in there, a lot of cocktails. One of them's a sidecar.
Yeah.
And so I did like a little 6-minute thing. I talked about that, talked about a little bit about what I knew about the cocktail, made one, posted it on Facebook, not YouTube to start with.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
just for mostly friends and acquaintances and family, kind of thinking as a way to keep in touch, you know, sort of a way to socialize during this time that everybody was, at least in New York here, hunkered down.
Yeah, you know, it's funny before you go on, home bartender Ann, her first video was also a Facebook video. Then she converted to YouTube. So it's interesting.
And so that's where it started. And all summer long 2020, I every week would do one of these, and I had my own little Facebook group following, and it was kind of it truly was social media, you know. It was an interactive thing. And round about Labor Day, mid-September, I had some people who know more about those things than I do said, well, you really, if you're going to do something, you should put it on YouTube, and started looking at ways to take an idea and grow. And so I migrated mostly over to YouTube around just about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And then I've been living there ever since.
Yeah, cool. Well, I can tell you, I mean, you know, your growth is pretty good. I mean, you know, for someone that started only a year ago, you know, YouTube is a hard nut to crack. And the cocktail niche in particular is pretty challenging. I mean, you got some guys who are really kind of just taking off like Anders or whatever, but most of us are kind of, you know, you're trudging along, trying to get to that place where, you know, you feel like this is worth it ultimately, you know, because it's just slow progress. So you want to feel like what you're doing is connecting, and that you're, you know, still enjoying it, and that you're seeing some sort of growth and stuff. And you're definitely seeing that, which is great.
Yeah. Well, I should probably say, for somebody who has never seen it, Broadway Barfly is actually a two-pronged, sort of a two-headed animal.
Yep.
I primarily do a cocktail pairing, like I said, with the main sidecar thing. We pick a show and a cocktail that are somehow connected, and 1/3 of my videos, sort of like the primary video of my little episode, if you want to call it, is doing the pairing. And then I try to post performance clips from the shows that we talk about, because a lot of people don't have a frame of reference. So if I have a pretty good collection of that kind of stuff, and friends who also have those things, so I'm able to give a frame of reference. And then I also sometimes do either solo cocktails that are sort of peripheral, but I'm not a bartender or mixologist by trade. I'm an enthusiast at best. So a lot of my angle is people who want to enjoy things.
Yeah.
You know, I try to, let's enjoy it together. You know, I'm not one to create, you know, all these cocktails on my own like so many others do.
Yeah.
So that's my niche.
I mean, but you know, I think it's an interesting one. First of all, I mean, it's not too many people that can say they have two niches basically in one, right? You have cocktails and you have Broadway, and maybe like the really hardcore cocktail enthusiasts might not really be tuned into your cocktails, but I think that the casual fan definitely would, and even someone that's just remotely interested in the way cocktails play into popular culture, you know what I mean? Like that to me is where I find it most interesting. I do like Broadway. I'm not a massive Broadway fan like yourself or have a huge knowledge base, but I actually surprise myself a lot when I'm watching your stuff. I'm like, oh, I know that. You know, but I've been around a lot of performing arts people. You know, when you work in the catering business, events business, you know, you're just constantly around actors, and you hear so much about people on Broadway. I worked in Midtown, so I've seen a lot of shows. You know, you do go back into the catalog a bit. You know, I also follow, I'm a big fan of some artists, you know, and actors who went on Broadway at one point, or did maybe a movie version of a Broadway show. So it's always fun to kind of like connect a little bit with that for me personally. But you know, you can grab this entire Broadway, you know, audience out there, and they all love a cocktail. I can tell you that.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that. I have found that getting to the YouTube thing, because it is sort of two-pronged, I think that might stymie the growth a little bit. I'm not sure if YouTube and the algorithm know exactly where to place what I do.
Yeah.
But that said, I find that the cocktail folks, or people who found me from the cocktail direction, are far more interested in the Broadway stuff than sort of people who might stumble upon me from the theater aspect are about the cocktails.
Yeah, like I said, I think that there's a connection there, where you're just, as a cocktail enthusiast, you're so big on history, right? So when you're a big, like myself, I love the history of cocktails. So any kind of history with the cocktail is always fun. If it's about, this was some president's favorite cocktail, or maybe it was featured in some show, or some actor loved it, or what, or who created it. So I think if you're a cocktail enthusiast and you're interested in the history of cocktail mixology, that you'll find even the Broadway connection to be an intriguing one,
Well, when you said pop culture, I think that really is it. Theater back at a time was pop culture.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Pop culture before film.
Before film.
Or even.
Yeah.
And so a lot of cocktails were created in sort of that turn of the century, pre-prohibition period. A lot of classic ones.
A lot of classic ones, correct.
And so it's sort of interesting, as I've been diving into this, to learn just how many classic cocktails do have some sort of theatrical connection, things that were named after a Pink Lady, for example, or a Floridora, these things that we take for granted if we know them at all. But it is an homage in a way to these things. People created an homage via a cocktail to these things that people in their day knew,
Have you found it challenging sometimes though to connect it? Because that's one of the things that like for myself, I tend to like to do classic or obscure cocktails. There's a plethora of that. For me, the challenge is trying to find something that I can do in under a minute. And even from that, I've strayed a bit. Sometimes if I know I can't do it, I'll just make it anyway. You know what I mean? But for yourself, I mean, you're there's a connection you have to make between theater and cocktails. I mean, right now you're in the early stages of your channel, but I imagine you're looking far down and you're like,
Yeah. Well, yes, there might come a time when the well is dry. Not yet. But, a lot of these, you said earlier, like, I go back to some of the old chestnuts. An example would be an old fashioned. Cole Porter wrote a song, "Make It Another Old Fashioned, Please," which was Ethel Merman sang and Panama Hattie. Excellent example of this pairing. I think at a time when those sort of golden age shows were written, cocktail culture and this sort of nightlife, your bon vivants, the Cole Porters, Noel Cowards, Man About Town, there's a lot more of that than maybe we make.
I mean, I think that was that was like an early renaissance for cocktails, really. You know what I mean? There was such a connection with actors and theater and film and all of that, really, of that time period for a good 20-year stretch, really, where, it was so symbolic almost to have some sort of cocktail reference in any sort of pop culture.
Well, and what I found that in some of the older things, and some of the old fashioned of Panama Hattie, which is a video that I did, as well as another old one, Babes in Arms and Claret Lemonade. In some of these things, like, there are very specific references, and it's kind of it's a real testament in some instances to the writers, why they chose a particular cocktail to mention. Stephen Sondheim is a meticulous lyricist. I mean, nobody touches him. And I never really thought about it, but in the song "The Ladies Who Lunch," it's sung by an alcoholic character. It's sung when she's drunk. It's sung in a bar, and she's singing about other women like her, really. And she mentions a vodka stinger. That when you start to learn about the history of the vodka stinger, like, oh, he didn't choose that because it rhymed with something. He chose it because that drink was fading in popularity, just like the woman.
Oh God, I love that. That's awesome. But I love that kind of stuff, man. I'm like wicked deep on stuff like that. Like, I love those kind of connections when it comes to anything. And when you see someone that's a writer, an artist, and they were able to do that, and often that's done with their own personal kind of fulfillment in it, because they don't know that anyone's gonna like pick that up. You know what I mean? You research that, so you were able to put that connection together. But the reality is that most people going to see the show don't really get that, but this is such a great treasure in it, though. You know what I mean?
Well, they get it on some level. On some level,
but I don't know that they get it to the extent that maybe you were able to really kind of dissect. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah,
there's like another period example, the gin martini, gin and vermouth, Frank Lesser, who is known to like his gin and vermouth. So everyone who knew anything about him says, in the song I Believe in You, the Finch character, who is the leading man, is singing his pep talk, and he compares himself to the slam bang reminiscent of gin and vermouth. I mean, it's like this Mad Men era reference to the epitome of a mid-century cocktail, the martini. So yeah, I love that stuff too. And while it did start out as just a way for me to take two things I was interested in and really dive deep into it, I like to think of it really as an exploration of pop culture.
Absolutely.
And history. The other thing, and I suspect you will, respond to this as well, to have an old cocktail like a Manhattan. I did a video not long ago about a Manhattan that's 140 years old or something like that. So when you make it and you're like, wait a minute, people, we're sitting in Manhattan drinking a Manhattan, generations ago. And
listen,
so
Rob, you're talking
living history in that sense.
Listen, you're talking to a guy who's absolutely fascinated with the Frank Sinatras of the world. We've had these conversations.
Your poster.
And, yeah, I mean, exactly. And I'm a massive fan of that era, and I agree 110%. When I drink a Manhattan, it's a mood. It's an absolute mood for me. It's not just a cocktail. I'm not looking to just kind of drink a delicious cocktail. It's like, to me, it's a mood. It's a moment. It's a history. When I drink, I love classic cocktails for that very reason. I feel like a certain connection to a time. Mm-hmm. I'm nostalgic that way. I've always been that way. And I love new age cocktails. Those to me are more about the cocktail. Like, they're just delicious. But when I'm drinking something that's classic, like a Manhattan, an old fashioned, a martini, something like that, it does put me in a certain mindset of a certain era. So I agree with you on that. Yeah. So let me ask you something, Rob. Has there been anything that you've tried? Because obviously in doing this, you've discovered cocktails. Has there been any particular cocktail that you've discovered that you're like, holy moly, where has this been all my life?
Yeah, one comes to mind. I mean, there are probably a lot of them. The 20th Century was one that I had never, I don't want to say I'd never heard of, but I'd never had it before. Yeah. And that was one, again, the Broadway connection. There's a very famous play and film, 20th Century, that was turned into a musical. So I did a video about it.
Yeah.
That was it's a surprising cocktail anyway, because of what it is.
Yeah.
Which, for people who maybe don't know, it's lemon and chocolate. It's that kind of combination. So that's something I've actually in turn have made for myself.
Oh, really?
Just because it was something I liked, surprisingly. I think the Aviation is another one. I have not done a video on that, but I have something in mind too.
You have something in
mind?
There's
another one that, the creme de violette was a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
So I would say those two.
That's a great cocktail. I tell you what, though, it's a tough bottle to use. I won't buy it because I know my old job. Like, I had one, and it sat there for centuries. It was 20 centuries.
I did the 20th century or the
creme de violette. Like, it lasted that long. It just 20 centuries.
Our friend at Whiskey Sugar Bitters did a
he uses it well.
He did a video just recently of Arsenic and Old Lace, which of course is a play in a famous film. I took him to kind of rip him a little bit in the comments, because he mentions it and said something about we'll move on from this useless information. So I take issue with that. But I tried that this weekend because I had everything for it, and I was like, well, let me see what it is. And that one was surprising too, because it has creme de violette and absinthe on top of gin and dry vermouth.
Okay.
Yet when it's all together, it kind of tastes like black licorice, which absinthe, I guess, does a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
But this really would have been, somebody more sophisticated of a palate than me, perhaps. But it tasted like black licorice. You couldn't pick out any one thing. And so,
I've never been a fan of absinthe in cocktails. I don't mind it if it's kind of a rinse, but it's never been my favorite. I'm not a fan of licorice, sambuca, stuff like that. I've never been my thing.
Yeah.
So, so I already asked, I mean, you kind of already answered the whole channel identity thing. Is like one of my questions, like, how would you identify your channel? I think it's pretty obvious with yours. Is there anything in particular that you want to convey with your channel though? Like, are you trying, I know there's this, we kind of hinted on this cocktail and pop culture connection and stuff. Is there anything that you'd want someone to leave your channel with a feeling or understanding?
Yeah. Well, an appreciation for things that they maybe haven't tried before.
Yeah.
And I find that theater and cocktails are two of those things that both in some are sort of have these clouds of pretension hanging over them. And so I think some of it's to take that away and say, you know, it's special, but it's not unreachable. I mean, everybody should be able to enjoy a cocktail or a show. And actually that's something that I have tried to make a point to, both as a producer, you know, you're always sort of concerned about how do you make it affordable? It's a very expensive thing to do. Yeah. And tickets by nature have to be expensive. So you find ways to make it accessible. And I found that with this channel, because I know a lot of people who've suffered through this, you know, people in the service industry, entertainment, they've lost incomes and that. Part of me thought it was sort of in bad form a little bit to like say, hey, let's make this drink with a $50 bottle of booze and, you know, a $30 bottle of this. So one of the things that I did do for a while is I made videos of making some homemade liqueurs. And I'm not like our friend the Wheat Pearl who like does that. I know I purpose, although I don't think I could do that, not at my novice state, but I did do some hack kind of things. Like you can sort of treat yourself. If you have some instant coffee and some sugar and some vodka, you can make that yourself. It doesn't have to break the bank, and you can treat yourself through a rough time. So there was a little bit of a message there too of, you know, treat yourself when times are rough. And,
but also you've also, you know, giving people some Broadway, you know, a lot of folks that weren't able to see shows because, you know, Broadway shut down for so long. So to kind of be able to, you know, watch some clips, some classic vintage clips is always fun too, you know? So Rob, so let me ask you, what was that first like cocktail you ever had that you were like, whoa, like this is my cocktail, like your aha cocktail?
Well, there are probably two answers. The first real cocktail that I drank with any regularity, like I ordered it, a friend turned me on to dirty vodka martinis. And I know some people will say vodka isn't a martini, but we'll argue that some other time. And so that was like my first big boy grown up cocktail. However, I have a good friend who about 10 years ago, I've known him for a long time, but about 10 years ago, he was doing these big liquor events. He is an event producer, and one of his brands, not to push one or the other, Hendrix was one of his clients. And they did these huge marketing events, and he would always invite me to them. And so that really turned me on to the cocktail world. Being like a whole mixology industry to go into these wonderfully themed events, and the whole purpose of it was to give you as many different samplings of how to use a particular brand. So that really turned me on to like cocktails as a thing, as a whole, you know, a whole world of mixology.
Now, when you're writing though, right? I know you're producing, but are you still writing?
I wrote all my own comedy material. I have, you know, written a play. I write the scripts, and my stuff, most of my YouTube stuff is somewhat scripted because it has to be. I couldn't. Well,
what I'm asking is if now that you're doing this kind of cocktail Broadway connection, if your future Broadway work, your theater work, will you be kind of trying to associate some more kind of alcohol stuff into it?
Funny you ask that. Yes. Well, one of the things that I've been working on is I'd like to make Broadway. Well, I am doing it. I don't know when it will happen because of COVID. I'm making like a live presentation, a Broadway Barfly live.
Oh, wow. No way.
Which will be sort of a combination of nightclubby cabaret stand-up act with demonstration, and ideally like a cocktail flight. Instead of having to drink a 2-drink minimum, you get a flight of the cocktails that are made.
Oh,
So
that's super cool, man.
that's one of the things I've been working on, and I will do that at some point. The world is a little uncertain as to when we're
Yeah,
going to be able to do it, but
that sounds really exciting, and I can guarantee that it'll be a hit. I mean, that's, listen, you're talking alcohol.
From your mouth to God's ears, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that being very well received. Put it that way,
Well, I think there is a market for that. I personally, I envision it as like cruise ship entertainment. Some people look down their nose at that sort of thing, but I think that's exactly the kind of thing that people who are, taking a princess cruise or something would enjoy.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, it probably makes more sense on a cruise ship where the alcohol is kind of flowing anyway, you know what I mean? And as opposed to a theater where, it's not like you can just get free flights of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not part of the package. You have to pay a pretty exorbitant amount of money to get a drink at a theater.
Yeah. Well, and I've taken this into consultation with my friend I just mentioned, who does, these big marketing events. Something like that can be if you are sponsored by a particular brand portfolio, it can be one more way to advertise that. Yeah. So,
well, that sounds really fun, Rob.
Yeah, so as far as writing, I am writing that. And cool. It's not, it will be different than the show Cocktail Pairings. It'll have a different feel to it, but it'll still be this.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be some theater, you know what I mean? Yeah. There's going to be some theatrics. You can't just kind of do a tutorial and kind of a documentary style. You got to be fun. And the fact that you have a comedy background is fantastic. It's going to only make it more entertaining. I don't know, again, going back to Frank Sinatra, I don't know if you ever look at some of their live performances and the way they kind of use alcohol as a prop is fantastic, So like, there's definitely some great reference material there,
Yeah. I don't think those were props. I think those were consumables.
well, what I mean as a prop for the show, like as part of their comedy routine.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
They did a Dean's, in particular, but in general though, like it was part of their shtick, and it made for some great comedy.
Yeah.
So
I watch a lot of those things. I'm a huge fan of any of those Rat Pack sort of mid-century Vegas-y type of people. Love them.
So Rob, tell me a good drinking story, man. I mean, you've been around Broadway for a long time in theater. I mean, there's I know you wacky characters on. You guys are crazy. You theater cats. Let me tell you something. Guys and girls are looking at you right now in the camera. I've worked in events in New York City for a long time, and those theater boys.
Yeah, we've knocked it back. I did this is going back in time, 99, 2000. This is not one single drinking story. It's an 8-month bender. I
don't know that this video is long enough, but go for it.
I was in 42nd Street in Europe. I was on an 8-month tour.
Oh, cool, man. Nice.
And we spent the Millennial New Year's in Geneva. We were playing this showroom. And so it was just a long thing, but that was mostly beer. That wasn't cocktails, because Europe isn't really, Europeans, I don't know that they drink cocktails. They drink a cocktail culture,
but wine and beer are definitely bigger, depending on which country you're in.
And so, but we drank champagne in a lot of champagne. The producers just pushed a shopping cart, like a grocery cart of champagne, out to the edge of the lake where we watched fireworks. And then the next morning, New Year's Day, 4 of us, 3 friends of mine and I, took the train to Calpe, Spain, because we had some time off. Anyway, the drinking part of this is that we drank gin and tonic in Spain. And by the time we left, we had trash bags of gin bottles.
Trash bags, what?
Of gin bottles, as we were cleaning up the place, because we were staying in a friend of a friend's parents. I don't know how we got there, but we were cleaning up, and we're like, how many bottles of this stuff are laying for 4 of us. But
that's a lot of tapas, I tell you that.
We drank all of the Coronas in the Mexican restaurant one night.
Jeez, you guys really put them down.
Yeah, it took me, there was nothing else to do.
Yeah, I suppose. You could read a book. You could read a book or something.
That may not be the kind of drinking. Well, there are some drinking stories I wouldn't say on YouTube because I don't know who's going to.
We'll talk offline here, buddy. I feel like, listen, like I said, guys, I know the New York theater scene. I know the theater guys a lot. They've got that. That was a tame story. Trust me.
That wasn't much of a story. I realized there's no punchline, but my friend and I who ordered vodka martinis were at some bar. I forget what it was called, like the Ramrod or Toolbox or, Manhole, some awful dive place. I don't remember.
I think I've heard of all 3 of those, by the way.
They're all the same place. And he says, I'll have a dirty vodka martini. And the bartender comes back and he says, we don't have any glasses. And so not one to be, to lose a sale, goes somewhere back in an office or storeroom or something, comes back with one of those gift boxes of Kettle One that had matching glasses. That you buy somebody for Christmas who you don't know. And so he had to unwrap this package to get us 2 martinis.
Oh my God. I hope you left that guy a good tip because that's
I guess we did.
That's above and beyond. That's hysterical. So let me ask you something. What would you consider to be kind of like, it's interesting because you're kind of just learning really the cocktail scene really in terms of mixology, but what would you say is your wheelhouse? Like what's kind of like where you feel most comfortable with cocktails? I'm thinking is the classic stuff.
The classics. Yeah. And, this past August, I spent 4 days on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail trying to.
Oh yeah, I saw those on Instagram. That looked really fun.
For fun, and because I was at home with my family, and that was a short drive from there. But I did really soak it in. Now I know a little something about bourbon, so I feel smarter.
Yeah, it looked really
I don't
fun.
know that that's my wheelhouse, but I certainly, after 4 days of distillery tours, can talk a pretty mean game.
Well, actually, speaking of drinking out, what was the name of the bar you said that was your favorite bar?
Oh, Joe Allen. Joe Allen is very famous theater haunt on Restaurant Row.
I don't know that one. I don't know if I know
it. Restaurant Row.
I know Restaurant Row.
New York City is on West 46th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue, and it's a row of restaurants.
Yeah, exactly.
Joe Allen is
they got the name right. They got the name just right.
Yeah, and Joe Allen was the owner. He actually just passed away this past year or so. I don't remember. Recently, like in recent history. And he had a bar that a lot of theater folks hang out in still to this day. You go there and you will almost always see some.
Oh, that's cool.
If it's in the evening, you'll see some face you recognize. And it's my favorite because, as the Broadway Barfly, to go see a show, my favorite part of seeing a show is having the drink afterwards and talking about it.
I agree. I agree.
That's where you go. That's one of the places you go to do it. And sometimes it's a better experience than the show you just saw.
Yeah. It's funny because it's true. But that's why I think the channel is genius, because I think that while right now maybe the cocktail enthusiasts and cocktail fans are what you're probably attracting most and you're getting the most engagement from, I do think that eventually you'll reach that broader Broadway audience, the theater audience, because they love to drink, man. They love to drink.
Yeah.
It's definitely part of the experience. It's not so much the they're binging or anything like that, but it's like you have to get a drink after the show. You just have to.
It's mandatory. If you go to the theater with me, it's mandatory. Nobody goes home right after, and so that's a good place to go. Like some close seconds would be like mid-towny places. I like Glass House after the show, sort of depending where I am. You know what else I love in New York? I don't think this applies so much in other cities. I love hotel bars.
Oh, I love hotel bars. Love hotel bars.
You pay a premium for sure. it's not cheap to drink in a hotel.
Nope.
But what you get in exchange is ambiance, and you get, like if you're at the Algonquin or somewhere like that, you get the place. But
love the Algonquin.
tourists don't
That's a
go
great
there.
cocktail, by the way. I made that. I've made that on my show. You should find a way to connect that. It's a
An
great cocktail.
Algonquin cocktail?
There's an Algonquin cocktail. So delicious.
You
So
taught me
delicious.
something new. I didn't know that. What is it?
Yeah. It's I believe it's pineapple whiskey, vermouth. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's something like that. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, tourists are out on the town, and so you can usually enjoy that space, usually with little chaos, you know?
Yeah, true. Listen, I like going somewhere and, you know, sitting at the bar and just talking to people. I'm just super conversational that way, you know, and, you know, like I'll go out to Cooperstown in New York. I'm a big baseball fan. And I'll go out there and just sit at the bar. I'll go by myself and sit at the bar. You know, I'll take a couple of days off, you know, take a trip up there and during the playoffs and just go talk to other big baseball fans. I mean, you know, you're going to find an immediate connection, you know, and it's the same thing after a show. You can find 100 people at bars in the area that probably just came from scenes, you know, whatever show. And, you know, there's a certain kind of like adrenaline after a show, good or bad show. There's a certain amount of adrenaline that you just want to kind of talk about it now. You know?
Well, they see your playbill, all that. Well, here's another drinking story. I was in Amsterdam, two friends of mine, and all through tour, we would wear our show jackets or a T-shirt. And people, when you went into a small place, a small town in Austria or wherever, you were an anomaly, you know, the Americans coming in. And so if you played your cards right, you could drink for people would just buy you drinks because they wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And so we were in Amsterdam, a friend of mine and I, we had worked this out to a science, you know, where we, you know, walk in and let people just without saying anything. And we had really struck up a good rapport with the bartender and the drinks were flowing and two other Americans walked in. And we're like, oh, shut up. Don't let them know we're here. They will ruin a perfectly good thing.
This is our bar, damn it.
Yeah, the one time I was like, shut up, don't say anything. They'll know we're Americans.
I gotta, Rob, I gotta ask you, man. You know, I'm skipping a little bit here on my questions, but like, and I know this is kind of choosing your favorite baby, so I'm not gonna ask you to pick one, but give me 3 of your favorite shows of all time. Because I unless you have your favorite, unless there is your favorite show of all time, is there?
I can give you 3, yes, and I have 3 favorites for different reasons. My very, very favorite is 42nd Street.
Oh, okay.
Because it's a perfect show. I mean, it really is. It's 42nd Street. I did it. I did 2 different productions of it, so I have that personal connection.
Yeah, of course.
I love it. I saw it on Broadway the first time around. I saw the national tour at a very young, impressionable age when that's what I wanted to do. So that's number 1. Chorus Line also.
Chorus Line.
Had a good experience. I did not a great production of it, but I did it. And it was running still when I first came to New York. And, you know, it's like, you know, Broadway dream. So I love that one. And the third is La Cage.
I don't know that one.
La Cage au Folk, yeah. It's I just did a video about it with the Zaza cocktail.
Yeah, I haven't seen your most recent video.
Yeah, it's well, it's the French film La Cage au Folk, the gay couple who own the nightclub and the son is marrying. Well, have you ever seen the movie The Birdcage?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
no, I did watch the video. Yes.
Yeah, that's
the name didn't connect. Yes, I did.
Yeah, and so I have two or three connections. I saw the show way back when, and you know, it's a great show.
This is the one that came out like around the 80s, and it was kind of right, wasn't it? It was
the film was in the Broadway musical is 83.
Yeah. So yep. All right. So I did watch your video. Yes.
But so I love the show, but I did it. It was I did a nice big production of it as Alban, so I was the star, and so I had a great connection, you know, connection to it that way. And it was my first Broadway producing credit. I was an associate producer on not the original, on the recent revival.
Yeah.
With Kelsey Grammer and Douglas Hodge.
No way, nice.
Yeah, nice. That sounds that sounds fancy, and it was, except that to be an associate producer, I brought some investors to the table.
That's,
so
you know what? That's still cool to be connected to a show with those.
So I got my
those are
name in the
names.
playbill, and I got to go to the opening night. And
That's
all
cool.
So yeah,
So that was your three. All right, cool, man. So let me ask you then, what's your like? As a theater person, if you're a theater guy, what is the difference between, because there's definitely a distinction, and I could tell you from your kind of palette of Broadway between, the 42nd Streets, the Chicagos, the Chorus Lines, and the Les Mises of the world, and the Miss Saigons of the world. There's a big distinction there between the style of show. How would you define the differences between those? So there's like kind of like a big, when I look at, because I love Les Mis and Miss Saigon, I love, what's the guy, Hugo, that wrote the Victor Hugo, right? Is it Victor Hugo?
Victor Hugo, yeah.
I love that very kind of big theatric movie almost kind of thing. Yeah. But it's so different from like you said, a Chorus Line or something like that. Just a very different style.
I think that what separates those,
it's almost operatic, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what separates those things are time, and like every time and style, and like every 10 years or so, there is a blockbuster hit that sets the trend for the next 10 years.
Got it.
And that has been historically, I think, historians might argue with me, but, Oklahoma started a trend that lasted for 20 years or so. Certainly Cats started a trend that Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis and Miss Saigon, all of those things followed. The producers started another trend with Hairspray and these movies that were movie musicals that were.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I think, people say they break new ground on that, but there's always one. And I'll say also, sometimes there are also the things that follow suit that don't succeed. So Broadway's a mean game. 80% goes stale.
It's actually one of the things I find so surprising from, having worked in Midtown and just hearing, watching your show, is how often these shows are gone after 3 months or a year or something like that. And you're like, holy shit. Because I know how much money goes into these things, and the amount of work and jobs and stuff that are kind of gone after that,
Yeah, that's relative too. There was prior to, say, the 1970s, certainly by the 80s, a show could be a hit by running a year. A show could be a hit by running a season. A season being like fall to spring.
So they were kind of timed anyway.
Economics were such that they could recoup and turn a profit and tour and often get a film deal in that amount of time. Now that's not the case anymore. There were some shows that set records. Oklahoma was a long-running show, then Hello Dolly, then Fiddler, then Grease, I think. Chorus Line, long-running show, and now it's Phantom of the Opera. But I would say in the past 10 years, big musicals cannot recoup their investment in a year's time, or under a year's time, I should say.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
There are exceptions, and there are ways to sort of make the numbers look nice, so that in theory it could, but in reality, I think most musicals anyway, in this era, have to run at least a year before they're going to be profitable.
What's the longest current running show? Is it Phantom
of the Opera, followed by Chicago, the revival, which is their marketing angle is that the longest running American musical, which is true because Phantom originated in Britain.
Okay.
But in that, Phantom is the longest. That opened in, I think, 88. I might be a year off by that. I think it was 88, and Chicago opened in 96.
My favorite recent show, and I think it just stopped maybe last year, was Jersey Boys. And I have a deep connection to that kind of period, and those guys and the doo-wop and Joe Pesci and Frankie Valli, like all those guys. And so in doo-wop music, growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, I absolutely loved that show.
I saw Jersey Boys for the first time last weekend.
No way. Are you serious?
It ran all that time on on Broadway. It's still running. Well,
It
will
is.
be
I thought it
running.
was ending soon. Okay, I was wrong.
They when they closed on Broadway, they moved to a large off-Broadway theater.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but now they are closed during COVID, but they will reopen. So I'm told.
Okay.
But I saw it at a theater I used to work at in St. Louis when I was at home this past week
Oh,
with
you
my
saw it in St.
family,
Louis. Okay.
and my mom has season tickets, and her friends do. So I drove some of them over, and we saw Jersey Boys. The first time I saw it, I had friends or old friends in the cast, people I had worked with before. So it was, yeah,
Such a
I
fun
loved it.
show.
I saw it and I wondered, like, why did I not see it when it first opened?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I really am,
Well,
especially considering how it was a huge show in New York.
It was. I see a lot of theater, and there are only so many days in the week, and only so much that you can do. So my thing is, if I don't see something in the first 6 months or
You're
so when
probably
it
not gonna see
runs,
it.
there's a good chance I don't see it at all,
Oh, wow.
or don't see it until much later.
Yeah, it's a hard rule. It's a hard rule.
Well, because I try to keep on top of things. So as other things open, if I didn't see it, it gets pushed farther down the line. There are new things that I should go see.
Yeah.
So Jersey Boys was one of those things. I didn't see it when it opened, and yeah.
I'm glad you finally did, because it's a great show.
I did
loved
too.
it. Really loved it. Obviously you have a great passion for Broadway and cocktails and stuff, but what does Rob do when he's not drinking and singing and writing and producing?
Oh,
what's a hobby of his?
Well, I will say the other thing I do that's not worth talking about here, I do some presentation consulting and graphic work for an investment bank, which I really don't want to talk about. It's not that important,
Yeah,
but it's important in that it has allowed me to do many other things.
Okay.
But right now, Broadway Barfly kind of is my hobby. Hopefully it will be more than that, but I've spent a lot of time doing that. Stand-up, when I did it, was a deep dive hobby. I never really pursued it as a career. I did it a lot.
Yeah.
But it was always sort of a hobby in that sense. I did it because I wanted to. I did it because I thought I could get good at it. And I did get good at it. I confidently say that. But
so did you do it in New York?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I over time I probably played at some point in most of the clubs here in New York.
Cool.
But I did a lot of bar shows, a lot of open mics, a lot of specialty shows. In sort of like that second George Bush period, I did a show called Laughing Liberally. I do take part in a show called Laughing Liberally, so I watch a lot of news. Every time you turn it on, what you got: global warming, suicide bombers, the war in Iraq. It is so depressing. I finally popped Schindler's List in the VCR. Just to lighten the mood a little bit. And we've been in Iraq now for over 3 years. And if you've noticed, somewhere along the line, he stopped calling it a war. It's now the liberation of Iraq. I find that about as effective as calling pubic lice love bugs.
So Rob, so tell me, what do you hope to, I think you already kind of tapped into it, talking about the Broadway show, taking the Broadway Barfly to theater. What else are you hoping to do with the brand, and just in general, like what are some of your ambitions going forward?
Two things I would like to do on YouTube. One is some collaboration things. You and I have talked about what that might look like. And I have some other ideas where I will continue to do my show shtick, but let somebody more knowledgeable and experienced than me in their own style, in their own set and way, make the cocktail, and so collaborate that way. I also, when COVID lifts to the degree where I feel comfortable doing this, do a little bit of like man about town kind of a thing.
Cool.
I have some people I would like to interview, some people who were involved in some of the shows or have firsthand connections to them, who I think would have a lot of fun things to say.
Yeah, that would be great.
Make them a cocktail and let them talk about whatever it is. So those are two things that I would like to do on the channel.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, listen, if you have an ability to kind of connect with some of these folks, you definitely should take advantage of that. And having a cocktail and having a conversation, that's America, man. That's you know what I'm saying? That's what it is. And so it'd be cool. First of all, it'd be great for your watch time.
Yeah.
The subscribers are one thing, the watch time is the other thing. But I think you'd be surprised how engaged people get, or are when they just listening to two people talk. When I first did these pub crawls, I was like, man, who's really going to want to listen to these two guys just talk?
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you have an inner Oprah. You really are very good at talking to people in a way to get them to talk. I mean, because I've watched a lot of these, or I've watched as much as I could watch of as many of them. And even before you asked me, I mean, I watched them just as.
Oh yeah, I know. We started this conversation on one of my things.
Yeah, but you really do. You have a knack for that, because it's very hard to interview people. Yeah. And keep a conversation going, because it's about what you're talking about. It is about anything other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had people who you could see there was it was not their first talent, I guess you could say, and that's cool. I mean, I'm the one, it's my responsibility. I'm asking you to be on my show. I think it's important that I'm able to kind of lead the conversation and get you to, I look at kind of like the Johnny Carsons of the world. We're going to go back to this era again. And he was such a great talker, but he was so good at listening.
Yes, he was. And people
so good.
Who you wouldn't, even Joan Rivers, who was like nothing but talk, when she was doing that talk show thing in day or nighttime, she knew when to stop.
Yeah.
Let the guests talk. I did back to me. I did
well, I am interviewing you, so it's okay.
One of the other things that I have done for the past couple of years with the Off-Broadway Alliance, I've curated and moderated these panel discussions about producing shows for people who want to learn something or hear other people who've done it. And the first one I did, it was like a lesson in the hot seat, like you're in when you do these shows, of how are people going to behave? How are they going to answer the questions and keep the conversation online? And I had a panel of 4 people, and we were talking about my first time. So the topic was people talking about their first time in a lead seat producing a show, picking the show, raising the money, getting it all done. And the first question I asked to the panel, the first person who spoke up was like, well, literally, when I was back in high school, I'm like, oh, we can't go that far back. We can't go that far back. And so I had to right away figure out how to manage a discussion. But you do that in stand-up too, because you have to, a good stand-up set is a conversation with the room with only one person talking.
Yeah. You're right. That's a great way of thinking of it. Yeah. Who's a favorite stand-up comedian of yours? Did you answer that question yet? No, I don't think you did.
I probably Wanda Sykes.
Wanda Sykes, did not see that one. That came out of left field.
I think she is. Well, I don't think she is. I know she's brilliant.
Yeah,
she's
hysterical. Yeah, but I don't know that I've seen her do stand up.
Oh,
I got to check her out. Yeah,
you have to. I'm not going to do her material. I saw her. All of her stand up shows are out there on. Most of them have been filmed. About 4 years ago, 3 or whatever, she did her Netflix special. I was able to go to the taping at Town Hall and see her live.
Oh, cool.
And seeing her live when she knows it's going to be on Netflix, you get a little something extra. But she's an excellent writer, smart.
Very smart.
And yeah.
So Rob, so tell us, what are you working on now? In terms of, are you doing anything on Broadway or theater at all? Are you doing anything? I know theaters are closed. Some of them are, most of them aren't.
I have a producing partner. His name's Morgan Sills, and we produce together, or the commercial things we produce together. We did have a show that was running down called Happy Birthday, Doug. that was a one-man show written by a comic actor named Drew Droege from Los Angeles. That closed down at the beginning of COVID. I would love to see it reopen. He's not in New York. He's moved on to other things. I don't think we'll see that again.
Okay.
We do have one. I can't really talk about them. I'd love to, but we don't have the contracts and things signed
got it.
to be talking about.
But there's stuff in the works. There's stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah, but we do have a play and a musical that we are actively working on.
Cool. That's exciting. So what do you think? You're thinking spring? When is like is there like a opening season for Broadway?
Oh yeah. Broadway in general is a fall spring season.
Okay.
Things tend to open around mid-October.
Okay.
This is actually the time when fall things start to open.
Got it.
Sort of after the summer, after Labor Day, typically after Jewish holidays.
Okay.
Then the season starts.
Got it.
Then there's a big influx during normal times, by the way.
Yes.
Caveating that this is not normal. And then there's a big spring opening, usually in sort of late March, early April. That's because the Tony Awards have a deadline that they have to open. Shows in order to be considered for awards, they have to open by a certain day, usually a certain day in late April, I think.
Got it.
So there's a big push in the spring to open shows.
So any show, so before we go, like what show on Broadway right now would you recommend most to people watching?
Now, see, I think I replied to a comment of yours that I don't give personal opinions.
I didn't say it was. I didn't say to tell me if it was good or not
on videos, because and I'll tell you the reason why I typically don't is because I do know a lot of people in the industry.
So how about with three? Would say 3 shows? Would that be fair? 3 shows that you could recommend?
I will do this diplomatically. I will say this. I think there are a handful coming up of interesting and important plays.
Got it.
That should be seen.
Okay.
And there's kind of maybe a record-breaking thing. Every new play on Broadway, I think this is right. Every new play on Broadway, at least opening this fall, is written by a writer of color. And many of them are women.
Wow.
So the times are changing. So I would say, just for the sake of being a part of that history, if someone is inclined to buy a Broadway ticket, see one of those shows. This is an important time in the history of Broadway.
Actually, to go off of that, as a Puerto Rican, I mean, I take great pride in Lin-Manuel Miranda. What do you think of him?
He's a hit maker.
He's that. Talk about a guy. You're talking about these trends, right? I mean, Hamilton is certainly the hit of this decade. Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
I've not seen Hamilton yet, I have to say. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I
have. See in the Heights? I mean, come on, give me that.
Yeah, well, yes.
All right, good.
He's a talent. God knows he's a talent, and I think
But has he taken like the Broadway?
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna take a stab here. I don't know him. I've never met him. I think I was actually in the same room as him one time. I bet if he were sitting here and we were having a conversation about classic Broadway musicals, he would toe to toe. I am certain of it. You think
his knowledge base is that good?
I would put money on it. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean,
I don't know him, but yeah. I bet it is, because he writes in a way that seems to really pay homage to the classics, but with his voice, his topics of interest, his topics of passion. And I think that it's just a perfect intersection of artist and history, I think.
Yeah, it takes a certain amount of just know-how in terms of the history of Broadway to even do what he's done, turn rap into a Broadway musical, to know how to make that work. And
make it palatable.
Yeah, exactly.
because the Broadway, I mean, I think I'll say 2 things about him, or about his shows, I should say. Because Jonathan Larson of Rent did this
Yes.
earlier, and I would say that the guys who wrote Hair did it in their generation too.
Mm.
They make their style palatable to a Broadway audience,
Mhm.
and they grow the audience because people who respond to their material now come.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they are clicking on two different cylinders there. And I think he absolutely has done that. And like I said, Jonathan Larson of Rent, the traditional theater goer is a 50-year-old woman, statistically speaking. They are the ticket buyers, they buy the tickets. So they make the choices of what they and their husbands or their and statistically that's true.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so these people who buy these tickets come in and see these shows. So they've written in a way that invites them in and doesn't put them off. But then they also, like in the case of Rent and Hamilton, and I'm guessing Hair in its day, attract a youth culture to Broadway.
I mean, I can tell you,
the Rent heads lined up outside the theater every morning for those rush tickets.
Yeah.
I know Hamilton has some sort of a lottery, I'm sure that is.
There's a lottery for, I think it's 3 tickets or something like that a day or something like that. Yeah. Well, listen, Rob, this was absolutely fantastic. It was great talking about Broadway, about comedy, about cocktails. Let people know where they could find you and on, when they're not watching you on YouTube.
Yeah, well, the YouTube channel, of course, is Broadway Barfly. I have an active Facebook and Instagram that are Broadway Barfly. They're the only ones out there. Okay. And those are the two social media platforms I'm sort of active on.
All right, cool.
Probably leaning a little more towards Facebook because a lot of the people who started following me live there.
All right, cool. So you have a community on Facebook.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Awesome. Well, Rob, listen, thanks again so much for being on. I mean, this was really good. I really appreciated this. This was an interesting one because there was so much non-cocktail content because obviously you do Broadway. I think this is the first time I've had someone here that's not just kind of like cocktails.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm flattered you asked. I'm thrilled to be here.
Please. I find your content to be super interesting and entertaining, dude. Like I said, I mean, I come from, an era of a fan of an era of entertainment that is very connected to yours. Having worked around a lot of Broadway folks, a lot of theater folks, working in Midtown, it's always been something that I've obviously, and I've seen my fair share of shows, and it's awesome. Theater's great. It's always, one of the things that's always funny is, I grew up in the Bronx and, with the guys, Broadway has never been something that they quite opened up to. But I think that like you said before, with the Lin-Manuels of the world and the Hamiltons of the world, like now it's a little more, their vibe, and it could be a good gateway drug into getting them to watch some of these other great films. Because I think the idea that, I don't want to hear people just sing. I want to, what I'm saying? Like, no, dude, like that's awesome. It's not just singing. It's not like they just literally sing the entire time too.
I'm not going to go into a whole other conversation, but I will say people know Broadway songs of whatever genre, but it's the stories that make a hit. It really is.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. It's awesome. Well, Rob, thanks again. Listen, guys, go check Rob out on his channel, Broadway Barfly. Trust me, if you guys love Broadway, or even if you don't, you're going to find it super interesting and entertaining. He makes a cocktail. He does a little history, and then he shows a clip. And it's really entertaining stuff to watch. All right, guys. So, Rob, say goodbye to the audience. And folks, remember, when life gives you lemons, you make yourself a cocktail. Cheers.
Cheers.